Wairoa, New Zealand, August 1942. An 8-year-old girl lets herself into the Salvation Army Hall on Queen Street to play. Inside, she finds a woman slumped in a broken armchair. She assumes the woman is asleep, so she carries on with her game, throwing pillows out a window to friends waiting below. She tells no one what she saw. 9 days later, a neighbor walks into the same building and makes the same discovery, except this time, there is no mistaking it for sleep. 2 women lie dead in their home. They have been dead for nearly 2 weeks. In that time, at least one other adult had already passed through the same rooms and noticed nothing wrong. The women were sisters, Brigadier Annie Smyth, 62, and Rosamond Smyth, 74, officers of the Salvation Army who lived together at the Wairoa Citadel, a small timber and farming town on New Zealand's east coast. Annie had spent decades as a missionary in Japan before returning home, and locals still remembered her fondness for the country and its people, an affection that, in 1942, with New Zealand at war with Japan, had curdled into uneasy rumor. Rosamond, the elder of the two, had built a local reputation as a strict, uncompromising moral watchdog, the sort of woman who kept a mental ledger of other people's failings. Between the two sisters, there was no shortage of people in Wairoa with reason to resent them. There was, however, no shortage of frustration for the police either. Nothing had been stolen from the house, and there was no obvious motive at all. Police believed the sisters were killed on or about the 8th of August, 1942. The weapons were a household poker and an axe, and the 2 women were found dead in separate rooms of the same small building. The semi-undressed state of both bodies fed rumors of a sexual motive at the time, though investigators were never able to substantiate one. The case was led by Chief Detective J. Bruce Young of Wellington, who would later become police commissioner, and the inquiry that followed was, for its era and setting, enormous. A reward of £500 was offered. Detectives questioned dozens of people who had clashed with Rosamond over the years. They chased down the wartime rumor about Annie's sympathies toward Japan. They re-examined the record of a woman previously convicted of a similar crime in nearby Napier. None of it produced a suspect. On the 19th of January 1943, a coroner returned the only verdict the evidence allowed: murder by some person or persons unknown. The Smyth case went cold, and Wairoa moved on, until December 1948, when a retired railway guard named Herbert William Brunton, known locally as Bunny, was found dead in the hut where he lived alone near the town's railway station. He too had been killed with an axe. Investigators found a bloody fingerprint on the back of his door and believed it belonged to his killer. In the hunt to identify it, police fingerprinted more than 5,000 people across the district. No match was ever found, and Brunton's murder joined the Smyth case as a second unsolved axe killing in the same small town within 6 years. 2 years after that, in September 1950, a night watchman named Frederick Andrew Stade was attacked with an iron bar at the Wellington railway station, minutes after the last train of the night had departed. Stade, a decorated World War I veteran with a reputation as a firm sergeant major type who enforced the rules strictly, had reportedly clashed earlier that night with a man wanting to use the staff toilets. He was found beaten in a pool of blood. This time, police found their man. Leo Sylvester Hannon, an itinerant laborer with a long record of burglary and prison escapes stretching back to the 1920s, was arrested and, in October 1950, convicted of Stade's murder at the Wellington Supreme Court. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. His defense lawyer at trial was a Wellington solicitor named George Israel Joseph. Hannon spent the next decade in prison. In 1962, dying of cancer, he asked to see Joseph one final time. According to Joseph, Hannon told him that he had killed the Smyth sisters in Wairoa in 1942, and that he had also killed Herbert Brunton there in 1948. Both killings, Hannon said, had happened while he was out of prison, a detail his own criminal record could confirm. If true, It meant that a man already serving a life sentence for one murder had, 20 years earlier, committed New Zealand's first documented run of serial killings, years before anyone had connected the two Wairoa deaths to a single hand. Joseph, bound by professional confidence and aware his client would not live to face any further charge, kept the disclosure to himself. Hannon died in Auckland's Paramaribo prison on the 9th of October 1962. He was never charged with either the Smyth or the Brunton murders. The confession stayed private for 2 decades. In 1982, Joseph published a book on unsolved New Zealand murders, titled By Person or Persons Unknown, in which he described a dying client he referred to only as X, a man convicted of killing a caretaker with a heavy spanner, who had also admitted to 2 earlier, unrelated deaths. A police inspector named Sherwood Young read the book and recognized the outline of cases his own grandfather had never solved. Bruce Young, the detective who had led the original Smyth investigation, and who had also worked the Brunton case before his own death in 1952. Sherwood Young contacted Joseph, identified himself as Bruce Young's grandson, and asked directly whether X was Leo Hannon. Joseph confirmed it. What no one appears to have done, even then, was go back and formally compare Hannon's fingerprints against the bloody print lifted from Brunton's door in 1948. Officially, both cases remain exactly where the courts left them. The 1943 coroner's verdict on the Smyth sisters, murder by some person or persons unknown, has never been overturned, and no one was ever tried or convicted for Herbert Brunton's death either. Leo Hannon was never charged with either killing. He died before that question could be put to a court, and a confession made privately to a lawyer, however detailed, is not the same thing as a conviction. What the record does show is a dying man's account, consistent with his known movements, disclosed years later by an author with no obvious reason to invent it, and passed on to police by the grandson of the very detective who had spent years chasing the same case. On the strength of that account, Hannon is generally regarded by New Zealand crime historians as the country's first identified serial killer, a label that arrived decades after his last known victim, and only because a lawyer's book happened to find its way into the right reader's hands. For Annie and Rosamond Smyth, and for Herbert Brunton, there was never a trial, a verdict, or a moment of public reckoning. There was eventually an answer, but even that answer arrived without the kind of proof a courtroom would ever have accepted. Some cases end with a conviction. This one ended with a confession no court ever heard. We'll keep looking until the record is complete.